The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
To the Alldus podcast. Today we are talking the world of cyber and AI, and I'm speaking with Puneet Kukreja. Puneet is a partner at EY, resilient national leader and head of cyber. Puneet, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I can't think of a more volatile time in the world that I've been alive where things are just changing so much. Cyber is probably front and center, I suppose, alongside AI, the most important topic that business leaders or general leaders are kind of happening in the world. And add a little bit of sprinkle of geopolitical tensions and issues that we're having. What is happening in the ground? What are you seeing?
I think with all of the geopolitical tensions that are in front of us, I'll call them business challenges. And I think with the way the world is and where the businesses are, the challenges have always existed. We just are now seeing a compounding of those. But on the ground, it's about ensuring how we navigate with confidence. So with EY, with what we are putting out, with what we are hearing from our clients, navigating with confidence is where we are headed. And there is a theme that's emerging, which is about the future won't wait. So if you ground all of the conversations, all of the thinking, cyber, AI, geopolitics, energy security, food security, sustainability, climate change, if you look at all of those challenges, then you look at how Ireland is uniquely placed to put a positive lens on it. It is about navigating it with confidence. And when you look to navigate it with confidence, there are a number of elements and aspects that come to life. There is policy, there is infrastructure, there is spend to keep the nation's economy going, but it is also building for the future. That's what we are finding on the ground, that yes, there is a lot of apprehension, but there is also confidence.
Yeah. How is that reshaping organizations? Because as you said, the future won't wait. It can be overwhelming with most of the different things that are suddenly a priority now. How is that reshaping the organization? But then also, as a nation, we're being reshaped.
Yeah, and see, that's a great point around priorities. And what we hear is, and what we are intending to do, and what our purpose really is to provide that level of comfort and confidence that where organizations find themselves, they have found themselves here before as well. So how did they get through the challenges that happened? COVID, a recent example. How did organizations get through COVID? They got through COVID by bringing the best minds together, by not shutting themselves down to good global thinking, but local implementation. But what's different this time is that there is a geopolitical change, there is a technology change, and the one element that is differentiating it all is the rise of AI. And with the rise of AI, I would call this a once-in-a-generation shift and a pivot. And for organizations that are thinking this will not impact us, it is impacting them already.
Yeah. There's something you said quite recently that really stuck to me, and I wrote it down, where resilience is now core infrastructure, not a compliance exercise.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. See, because for me, when we've looked at where the regulatory lenses are going. So you look at NIS2, you look at Critical Entities Resilience Directive, you look at the AI Act, you look at Cyber Resilience Act. Yes, they're all cyber, but they're also core infrastructure. Regulation and policy only gives you direction. It gives you the controls that you need to have in place. But then if we look at the spend that is going in, there is 200 billion plus that is going to be spent on infrastructure. There is 2 billion plus that is going to be spent in the health sector. There is energy transformation that's happening. So when you look at just those three core sectors around health, infrastructure, energy, of course, maritime security will always come into it. In the investment that's then going in, you cannot leave the stress and the resilience of that into a checkbox approach to say, I will have a BCP plan, I will have a DR plan.
Yeah.
The investment needs to be thought of from an engineering lens. The engineering lens needs to be considered in those investments, because in my mind, resilience engineered is something that is deliberate. It is something that is at the core of your transformation. And when you align that with the technology spend that's going to go in, the technology infrastructure that will have to be stood up, but also the technology infrastructure that will require a transformation from what exists today to what it will be shaped into tomorrow, and the gap in between, is it ready to have that stress tested? And that stress testing for me is about critical infrastructure, is about resilience as critical infrastructure, rather than resilience being a part of a sub-program and being relegated back to being BCP and DR.
And that comes up to the next point, where testing how the systems fail and recover. And this is like your constant, right? You're in that mode, and it's not going to be surprising to you. You're proactive around it. You're building up the harnesses around it. You're being thoughtful about it. And that's a new mindset, isn't it?
It is a new mindset, but it is also a change. So I'll talk about it from the concept of 20 years ago, security was a policy and a firewall, right? 20 years later, cyber has evolved. It's no longer called security, it's called cyber. Why is it called cyber? Because if we look at the three most talked about breaches of the last year, there was a retail giant that was impacted. There was aerospace impact, which grounded planes, and there was real life impact. And then there was a manufacturing organization. The manufacturing organization's case study is quite unique, because that was the first time after subprime mortgage crisis that government had to step in with assured loans, and it had GDP impact on the country. So if we now look at those three vectors of retail, aerospace, manufacturing, that is not a security policy or a cyber investment. This is something that happened in the back room. That's a societal impact issue. Now, if you now expand and extend that societal impact issue, and we talked about testing, we talked about stress in the system, I am 100% sure that all of those organizations had a BCP plan. They had a DR plan. But the challenge with BCP and DR plans are that they are not actively tested. They are tested once a year like a security control, like any controls that exist. They are then stuffed in a drawer, and very few people actually know about them. And then the report goes into boards, which in my mind provides a false sense of security, a false sense of comfort. Why we are saying that resilience needs to be engineered, why we are saying that resilience engineered, and why we are saying that you need to be able to navigate the future with confidence, and the future won't wait, is because the future is here already. So just to finish off on that point, like we had a security policy and a firewall is not cyber, a BCP and a DR plan is not resilience. It needs to go through not only the entire setup of your organization stack, but it needs to be expanded and extended out into the cloud services that you are now invoking, into the third parties that you are now engaging with, because they're all part of an expanded ecosystem.
Now, if we think about boards, what was they define that keeps working? How did they evolve with this, take accountability on that? I suppose the expectation is AI literacy, cyber literacy. The expectation is they're proactive. This is a catalyst. How do they now step up?
It has to be about making sure that they understand. So the conversations that we've been having is that board members, like any other executives, they all have their areas of specialization. But together and collectively, they create a forum, they create the umbrella under which good governance takes place. So the first thing they need to understand is, what is this challenge really? what does this challenge mean and how does this challenge be compounded? Outside of understanding, they then need to be trained. Training in boards and training with boards and training for boards happens by having experiential and lived experiences being shared with them. There's a lot of work that we at EY are doing across the boards. There's a lot of work I personally do with a number of boards of the country to walk them through and take them through what would a lived experience of having to respond to a crisis actually look like.
Yeah.
We actually have two very distinct models where we actually take board members through of what would a cyber crisis, now the crisis could be your third party's gone down, crisis could be your data centers being impacted, crisis could be your third party's being compromised. But we do it from a cyber perspective because a cyber incident or a cyber crisis is something that spreads very quickly.
Yeah.
The speed and the veracity and the velocity with which it spreads has an impact. It is something that can happen from any aspect. It could be internally generated, it could be externally generated, as we've talked about. So putting board members through that experience and the decisions that they need to make gives them an appreciation of what does the world of cyber, but then what does the world of resilience actually look like. And in that is then further expanded into this concept of minimum viable state or minimum viable company. Because coming outside of the crisis leadership workshops, we are now pushing out and making boards aware that outside of just returning to normal in a post-breach scenario, if you were only going to be able to bring up 10% of your organization's operating capacity, what does that 10% mean? What is that minimum viable state? What is that minimum viable company? 10%. And a question I often ask is, if you're a 1,000-person organization and you can only bring back and allow for 100 people in that organization to be returned to operating service, who are those 100 people?
Yeah.
Do you have a list of, these are my core 10%? So what does the concept of MVC, minimum viable company, minimum viable stage 0 looks like? So that then expands to minimum viable state 1. How long can you operate? And yes, the lens looks like, oh, but this is BCPDR, but the conversation is, well, it's not. It's not BCPDR because when an event happens, it is about, did the event bring something down or did the event actually get managed because stress was already planned and built into the systems across the infrastructure stack, from the network into your key applications, across your backup environment, across your monitoring, observability and insights, not only for stuff that you manage yourself, but also with your third parties. How quickly did you actually respond?
At Alldus, we're helping companies hire professionals in the field of cybersecurity and AI on permanent and contract. And our differentiator is we're helping companies hire people that we really trust. And we build that trust through referrals. Over 85% of the people that we place into roles on contract or permanent are through referrals, or people we know who recommend them. This is really important, particularly in the world of cyber, where you want to have professionals who are really good at their job, who are trusted, and they can come in and add value to your business. On a contract, we've got some of the most niche skills available for people to hire, but also we're introducing virtual CISOs. CISOs that can come in and work in your business between 1, 2, 3, 4 days a month, if not a little bit more. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about the services Alldus provide, please feel free to get in touch. Now back to the show.
Kind of slightly moving track. How do you keep up with the tsunami of updates that are happening around the world at the moment? And then how do you then communicate the kind of key points? Or how do you kind of cut through to the noise? Have you got like a first principle decision matrix on that?
With the amount of change that's coming through, with the amount of development that's coming through, there's this concept of, and I'll talk about it from the perspective of hygiene, right? There is cyber hygiene, there is technology hygiene, there is technology debt. But if we then go back to first principles, what is a board member or a leader really concerned about?
Yeah.
It comes back to three things. And those three things are quite simple. So if we remove the technical complexity, while AI is unleashed, there is AI era, there is Claude, there is Glasswing, there is always something going on. Your data centers have been bombed, which has never happened, right? So we'll talk about that in a minute. But it is about three things. And in my mind, it's about, is there disruption? Is there downtime? And have I had my organization's data leaked or compromised? Data can come in many forms. It can be personal data, it can be financial data, it can be data that is key to the operations of your business. Is it disruption? Is it destruction? Because disruption, destruction, again, have different elements to it. So if you break it down into those three core elements, everything comes out from that. Hygiene is the next level. So what is hygiene? Do I understand, and I talked about this from the concept of the 5 no's. So what does hygiene mean? Do you have the 5 no's? Do you know your infrastructure? Do you know who has access to your infrastructure? Do you know your third parties? Do you know your critical services? And do you know who is going to help you should anything go down? So destruction, disruption, data, hygiene, what are my systems, where are they at, the 5 no's, and then in the end it's about decision making. Have we practiced, have we sat around a table and done a number of crisis leadership workshops? Do we understand our minimum viable state or minimum viable company? That is muscle memory. It's like doing a fire drill. Do we know who the fire warden is? Do we know where the escape stairs are? Do we know where everyone's going to go and come together?
So much easier to do it once you're training. You get the routine. You start, that muscle kicks in, that muscle memory as well. Briefly want to speak about Claude. They introduced Mythos. Claude said only 40 of the elite customers can have access to this. If you haven't seen it before, it's an AI that can determine kind of 0-day vulnerabilities across different systems. It's too special to be allowed out to the general public or bad actors. What do you think this starts to mean for the rest of the world when you got this type of AI capability?
I'll link it back to first principles. What Mythos has done, and I think in my mind is brilliant, because what Mythos has done, Mythos has brought out, I would say, and brought to the forefront decades worth of technical debt. What it's brought through is the urgency that will be required for organizations to transform, but plan to transform, because the debt has existed. With Mythos, the debt is now exposed, right? A conversation that I was having with a number of leaders, and I have had over the last few days and few weeks, is think about Mythos as a 0-day. So what is now your plan, going back to the 5 no's, going back to cyber hygiene? If you have a good change, incident, cyber response plan in place, what does a 0-day plan look like?
Yeah.
Have you practiced your 0-day plan? Because yes, it will expose it, but what's going to hit? Something is going to be hit. Now, where will they hit? They will either hit a third party, they will either hit an exposed system, they will either hit through currently compromised credentials on the dark web, they will try and expose it through ransomware, or they will try and do it through system intrusion. So let's not forget how somebody gets into the organization.
Yeah.
It is through an ID. It is through a system that's not patched.
Yeah.
It's through a web application that's sitting out there that no one knows. It also sits through a third party that you don't know or you haven't checked about.
Yeah.
And it exists through end-of-life systems that are sitting on the edge. So if we look at those 5 no's that I talked about, you go back to the hygiene factors, and Mythos now exposing the vulnerabilities or the potential to, the way organizations need to start to think about it is that what would be that change and transformation program that I have been putting off? What would that change window that I cannot allow because the system will possibly go down now look like? And then what is the urgency around it?
And I think it becomes front and center that urgency is now for everyone to see. And even my wife, who has no interest in this whatsoever, is talking to me about this, right? So people are now starting to kind of take note, and it's starting to become more important. Puneet, we could talk all day about this.
Absolutely, we can.
This has been brilliant. Puneet Kukreja, who partner at EY, head of cyber and resilient nation leader. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.